All right, welcome to Halitics. So glad to be talking to you today, Monday. I'm Hal Ginsberg. Don't forget to click like, click subscribe so you can get notified every single time I go live. You can join me by calling in, or as Arlen is joining me on the Google Meet, but then you have to be a special guest. And Arlen, of course, is, as I've promoted you now, not just a pundit, not just a website, thebigpicturereport.com, but you are now officially a thought leader, Arlen. Congratulations.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
I
I've
didn't get
never
my,
been sure what a thought leader was. Do you know? I mean,
well, I hope I'll get something in the mail that'll, some kind of thing that'll show me. I don't know. That's news to me.
I think I do remember there we on basically on maybe a competing radio station from the old KRXA 540 AM, which by the way still exists. They are now Spanish. There was a host. She did a few shows with me, but we kind of had a falling out. We had very different visions of what talk radio should be. Rebecca, now I can't remember her
Costa,
name. She was in
Costa.
Costa, yes, Rebecca Costa. Uh, she um, she wrote a book, The Watchman's Rattle. I think she was
Yes.
sort of a thought leader. She used to say that her programs often she would have guests on, and they were thought leaders. We had very different views. She would entertain people on her program and basically just let them go on and say what I consider to be a load of crap half the time, and she would never challenge them. I'm kind of the opposite. I want to really present a vision that's my vision for what I think America should be, and that does not mean that wealthy, influential elites get to spout a pro corporatist vision or view without pushback from me. As you know, Arlen, even I push back on you, and you are pretty much closely aligned, I think, when it comes to progressive politics.
Well, we do have our differences, Hal, and that makes it all that more interesting, I think. So that's all good. And I hope I have, I'm gonna just hope I have time this week to add thought leader to my business card, along with political pundit. I think it'll, give me some gravitas.
Yeah, there's no question that the thought leader moniker is something you really want to share. And I would let people know too, Arlen, that I'm the one who thought leader, Hal Ginsberg colon thought leader, something of that sort. So
Oh,
you make it clear that I'm the one who first designated you a thought leader, because I think that would add to the status, the enhanced status that comes with the
I
term.
assume you've been a thought leader for a while. You have the cred, the background, the
Well,
resume.
I'm not calling myself a thought leader. I'm saying you're a thought leader. So I think,
Oh,
but my calling you a thought leader it's sort of like, Barack Obama's endorsed Joe Biden. That gives him a leg up in the race against Donald Trump. Similarly, when I call you a thought leader, I think that gives you kind of I don't know, a little wind in your sails. Let's put it that way.
yeah. Hopefully, it'll add a few hundred people to your, views and all that, and
I
we can
wish I
take
had
off
a
from
few
there.
hundred people. You get hundreds, you get thousands when you post it. We've talked about this at Coast, right? At dailycoast.com.
Yes, and
So,
op-ed news
so
at
we
Times.
got a lot to talk about, Arlen. I just cut you off. I'm sorry about that. I do really, and I said, yeah, the 3,000-year storm. So we've got a lot of storms, and in fact, they kind of impacted on you, did they not? There in Monterey, the earlier storms, well, in January were mostly SoCal, but now the whole state getting pummeled. Tell us what it was like in Monterey over the past just one day or a couple day storm now.
One day, yesterday morning, all of a sudden the electricity went out, which is very unusual. The power was out for the whole day. It didn't come back till later in the evening. So that was kind of a surprise. We were sitting in the dark for a while, but everything seems to be okay now, except for just going out briefly a few minutes ago, but that was just momentarily. So I think we're okay now.
Well, there
Nancy,
you are, that picture of Arlen wading into the swampy
that's,
hinterlands to get your
that's not my
car.
car.
And say it again.
That's not my car. And
Oh,
it may be somebody else. I'm
were
not
you
sure.
helping somebody then? Is that why I've got that the post
Yeah,
the Times put you there?
yeah, that's my jacket. So yeah,
I thought that was you and now of course I'm blanking on your wife's name. Say
Nancy.
it, Nancy. Right, of course, Nancy. I thought that was you and Nancy, but you're saying no
I don't think so.
because
Nancy
there's
was just
someone
out.
in the car too. You can see the doors open in the car.
Yeah, it's very dangerous out there. Nancy said Nancy was just out doing some activities and said it's pretty wet out there. I mean, there's evidence of flooding, but it seems to be okay right now.
And the winds have died down. Now you lost power along with what, maybe 80,000, I think, Central Coast residents and millions around the state, as I understand it. Was this storm, did it feel that powerful, Arlen, when you were in the midst of it, if I may ask?
Well, definitely the wind was stronger than I ever remember. I had to upright my recycling bins, which fell down on this, on the curb, and had to make sure everything that's hanging up maybe that could be brought down. I brought down so they won't fall off. So yeah, it's a little bit very much unusual for this area.
Arlen, I remember when in maybe the first or second year that I was operating the old radio station there, we had a tremendous storm. I don't know if you remember, we were actually knocked offline. You could certainly listen to us on the internet, which even back in 2005, 2006, we were kind of pioneers, if I may say so. But we may not have been from the very get-go online, but pretty early on. And I don't know if you recall, but we lost. We didn't lose transmission, but we lost our aerial dish, which brought in the syndicated programs. So it really was just Hal and Coach and whoever we had as local hosts. I don't know if you made it on at that point, but do you remember that it was a tremendous storm?
I do remember like Big Sur being cut off for a few days, areas around the peninsula that were cut off. So yeah, we've had some bad storms in the past. There's no question about that. And we'll probably have more in the future.
Oh, there will be, no question. So 1,000, by the way, that image, just to put all kidding aside, that is not the Pajaro. Is it the Pajaro River? Is that what the one is that comes out of Salinas? Or it's a Salinas River from Salinas?
Sounds about right. I don't know.
All right. That picture, though, is of the Guadalupe River in San Jose. I did not know San Jose had a river, but clearly there it has not just a river, but a lake. This storm is throughout the state. As I mentioned, we have seen two very powerful storms already, and they call them 1,000-year storms. This is the most powerful of all, Arlen. What this kind of reminds me of, I mean, I can't, but I read a lot of California history when I was living in Monterey, and the ordeal that was suffered by the Donner Party, where storm after storm, powerful Sierra snow storms pummeled these pioneers in the Sierra Nevadas. It's kind of like that, right? They call these rivers of atmospheric rivers, and that's just a tremendous amount of moisture concentrated in a narrow band. And we're getting them now. So it's kind of a similar vibe.
Well, we're fortunate. We have a lot of food in the house. We don't have to go do the same things that the Donner Party did, I don't think. So, hopefully we'll be better off for a while.
Well, I was going to say, if you are contemplating the Donner Party method of survival, have you been in touch with our friend
Fred?
The cop? Now I can't remember his name.
Fred,
I've lost my mind completely. Who is your buddy out there? What's Fred? That would be you would be able to survive for a month on Fred.
You're right about that. I don't think he'd let me chew on him, but you never know. If I have to, we'll work it out.
All right. Well, don't tell Fred I said that he might be your ticket, your kind of
our secret
plan B, if you will. Arlen, continuing though on this topic, have you got an opinion on whether we are seeing these storms as a result of human action? Is this the climate crisis human caused writ large?
Well, I would think that would be pretty obvious to everybody. It's been that way around the world and all kinds of places. And, the weather's just not the same as it used to be, and it's changing all the time. And, it's causing problems, people having to migrate and, not having you know, uh, enough farming land and the heat and the wildfires. And yeah, there's a lot of things going on that used to not go on as much as they are now.
Yeah, and the mayor of San Diego famously said, famously because I played the video on this program a few weeks ago, that San Diego was experiencing climate change, human caused. I agree. These many storms, 1,000-year storms in such a short period of time, the odds are against those absent some change, and the change we're seeing, or like almost certainly caused by human action. That said, I did point out back in 1846-47, the winter of 46-47, the Donner Party did experience tremendous dislocations as well because of those storms. So it isn't unheard of, but what you're seeing is more storms sometimes, and then drought as well. It's kind of more what do you call it again? Where there's extreme variability and more extreme. So the droughts have been terrible, and then every now and then you get a tremendous amount of precipitation. This is all what the climatologists have predicted as a direct result of human action. So that's what we're likely seeing.
How can it be more obvious? I mean, I'm surprised that, I think the Democrats have to hit this one really much harder because Republicans are not addressing it at all. And, I think it's a good issue for the Democrats.
Well, how much credibility, though, does Joe Biden have, given that he broke Trump's record in terms of, or during his presidency, the United States is now producing more oil and gas than it ever did before. He did break the record of Trump. So Trump also obviously an ally of the oil and gas industry, which is thereby an enemy of the earth. But then Trump broke Obama's record. So does it really matter who's in the White House when it comes to fighting the climate catastrophe, the new Holocaust? It doesn't apparently matter. Both parties are allies of the enemy, of the destroyer, the earth destroyers, it would appear to me. Is that unfair, Arlen? Is that unfair?
Well, I mean, Biden does try to do some things that are, to help the climate, the climate problems here, and he's, a little bit here, a little bit there, but probably not enough. And yeah, he feels that he has to get as much energy from the coal and the gas in order to satisfy the voters, and because otherwise Republicans are really going to pound on him and say, hey, we don't have enough energy here, and the only one that can keep us alive or keep us going is Donald Trump. So,
well, I think the big problem Biden has to be kind of try to see it from his perspective is that there's more within the Democratic Party. I think there's just as we see more variability in our weather. We have more drought years, very, very serious droughts than we used to have. We also have some very, very rainy years. Let me see if I can I'm going to put this clip on right now. So like the weather, Democratic voters are more variable than Republican voters are. And I think this is a bit of a problem for Biden because many young voters, and myself, not a young voter, I wish I were still a young voter, but I'm not, but young voters knowing that they're going to bear the ever more serious brunt of the climate catastrophe, the new Holocaust, are, I believe, understandably, justly livid at the president for not doing well, for exacerbating the problem, for making it worse. I mean, it's not just that he hasn't moved fast enough; he's actually making it worse. But there are other Democratic voters, working class people, maybe older people, who are like, "Hey, I can't afford to pay one more dime at the pump for gasoline. I can't afford higher gas prices when it comes to heating my home." And they face that problem too. So Biden does have to finesse that. I think on the Republican side, the voters are either in denial with respect to what that there's even a climate holocaust happening, or they don't seem to really care. I just wanted to put this up. I don't know if you can see that slide, but you can see this is California precipitation over more than the past 100 years. And what's really interesting about this, Arlen, I think, is that you can see there are the lows, right? So the left side or the right side, the vertical, is just how much rain we get in any year in the Golden State. And if it's below that horizontal kind of line that runs just below 23, I think you can see that 23 inches. If it's below that, then it's a below average year in terms of rain. If it's above it, it's an above average year. So what you're seeing is some real peaks of late, although the peaks tend to be lower. This year we'll probably see a big peak, but you're also seeing ever lower lows, and those are the droughts. So a lot of variability in the weather. It used to be always variable in California, but it seems like we're really seeing extremes on both ends. And again, this is definitely the dynamic
no matter where
that is expected, predicted when there is ever hotter temperatures due to humans pumping more and more CO2 into the atmosphere.
It seems that, wherever you go, people say, oh, we've never had weather like this. This is very unusual. And, that goes on all over the country, all over the world. And obviously the weather is changing and, we don't know where it's going to end up, but it's certainly, not good for most people. And people are, justifiably worried that, if we can't control our weather, we're going to pay a big, big price.
Well, no question. You can see from that chart, 2000, I think around 11, 12, something like that in that range, somewhere just before 2015 was the lowest amount of precipitation on record in California. And of course, that coincides with the drought. You also see that line, that brown line, if you can see it, declining, meaning that the average rainfall or precipitation in the Golden State has been declining. Again, this year will almost certainly be an exception because we've had three of the most extreme storms in California history, with the latest, the one that is now hitting the Golden State more in Southern California, the most that I think it's the greatest rainstorm California has. I don't know if it's the greatest ever, but it's the greatest this year for sure.
Well, it's so hard to predict because, it seems like we've been having a drought and we're all worried about a drought. In the last couple of years, there's been a lot of rain. So, we just don't know what's going to be coming up next. That's the way weather is. You just have to wait for it and see how it goes.
Well, you said something interesting, Arlen. I just want to go back to it for just a moment. One of the areas people who watch this program know Arlen and I agree on a lot, but where we disagree is whether the Democrats really are a group that you should vote for. I'm almost certainly now of the mindset no, and I'll play some clips maybe later about why I say that. But I do have this question for you, Arlen, because you said that the Democrats should talk more about the new Holocaust, the new climate Holocaust, as I call it. What should they be saying?
Well, did you just point out, hey, this is happening? So many people are feeling it, so many people are experiencing it, and yet the Republicans totally deny it. By the way, you're saying, well, we can't vote for Biden and the Democrats, but as we both know, we only have two choices: Republicans or Democrats. So we're not going to get anything accomplished with the Republicans. At least the Democrats, for the most part, are at least trying.
Well, they're trying to make things worse. We just heard that. I just pointed out that Biden's producing more oil and gas than ever before. So I don't, we'll get into more with Genocide Joe, but there you can see it. SoCal, this is from the LA Times 2 weeks ago. Well, maybe a little more than a week ago. SoCal sees 2,000-year storms within weeks. More could be coming. And of course, that goes along with what I was sharing with regard to your storm now, Arlen, the one that you're experiencing. This is the biggest of all. This is the biggest. It's pretty amazing. So two 1,000-year storms in less than a month, and now the third and the most powerful of all. I think if Democrats want to make this an issue, they've got to figure out a way to make sure that people don't legitimately fear their economic future will be negatively impacted if the
Well,
Democrats take action to address it, take
well,
serious action, which they should do for sure.
how can people not see what's going on? All these drastic changes in weather and all the problems that come along with it. And at least one party, the Democrats, are at least looking at it and thinking about it and trying to get some things accomplished. Republicans don't even want to look at it. They think, well, it might hurt the economy if we do anything about it, so we're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrats need to figure out a way to say if we, the Green New Deal promoting changes in the way our economy works to reduce very significantly our dependence on fossil fuels will actually make your life better. And the problem is they have no credibility. They, along with the Republicans, have presided over a 60-year period now where working class fortunes have declined, or I won't say 60, because it was up until the early or late 60s that the quality of life and was improving pretty significantly. But for the past 50 years anyway, we've seen stagnation and for many working people a decline in their fortunes. So the Democrats just have no credibility. And
Well,
Republicans, of course, will exploit that fact at every opportunity. Not that they have any credibility, and I don't think people think they have credibility, but the Democrats are the ones who are saying we have to do something. And if you say you're going to do something and what you've done in the past has made things worse for people, they're going to be very, very skeptical.
well, we both agree, Hal, that things have gotten worse over the last few decades, and Democrats are not doing enough to change that. Republicans are doing, absolutely nothing or even making things worse. So there's definite, problems here that are not getting addressed by the government, and that's why I think most people, young people, just don't believe in the government anymore, don't believe in politics anymore, don't believe, anything is being done, and they're right.
It's
There
very
is,
sad. It's so sad
yeah.
because while they have very legitimate skepticism, I don't know how else to make positive change except through politics. So as much as I'm disgusted by the Democrats and just have zero, the Republicans are just sort of persona non grata to me altogether. I don't know what alternative there is but to try to make political change. That's why we do Halitics. It's Hal and politics. It's Halitics. Click like, click subscribe. Every Monday, Arlen joins us and we get his wisdom. Just wanted to put this chart up here as well in California, since we're talking about California. This is the weather in California. That's the temperature chart, and the 0 is kind of the normal average year. But of course, average years are getting hotter and hotter in California. We saw in late 2010s over 4 degrees Fahrenheit above the norm, which is extraordinary. This year, or last year, I should say 23, was 1.5 degrees Celsius hotter than normal for the entire planet. That 1.5, you actually multiply by 1.8 to convert from Celsius or centigrade to Fahrenheit or 9/5. I don't know, 1.5. It's about 2.7 degrees hotter worldwide using the Fahrenheit scale. California way above that, over 4 degrees hotter last year, or 22, almost 4 degrees hotter. So actually, California is experiencing climate change at an accelerating rate, Arlen, compared to the rest of the world, planet.
Yeah, and nobody's figured out a way to, stop all this bad news coming on. I mean, it's just like we said, the Republicans don't want to touch it at all because it would affect the economy, and the Democrats are being very cautious, and they're just not doing enough.
Yeah, I think caution is actually recklessness, right? I mean, we use terms in certain ways we should be careful, because failing to take immediate, powerful, forceful action strikes me as the most reckless way to possibly act. Caution would be to say we've got to start reducing our emissions immediately. And you can see from this chart that the predictions are up to 12 degrees hotter by the year 2100. Some people alive today, Arlen, will be alive in 2100. There are children alive today who are sentient, who are conscious beings, who will be alive in 2100.
I don't
If
think I
you
will
are
be.
5, 6, 8 years old today, you would be in your 80s in 2100. That means many people will be alive indeed at that year. And you can see the temperatures, depending on whether we maintain the current rate of increase in emissions, will probably be 6 degrees hotter. The best we can hope for is staying about a little bit, about where we are now, which would be 2, 3 degrees hotter. It's very, very scary. It's very frightening.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're not going to be around then, because that does sound scary. But I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be around until 2100. I don't know about you, but
I think you're right, Arlen. I think that's something for us old fogies to be grateful for, actually,
yeah.
that we're getting out before the getting gets, while the getting is still sort of kind of good.
Well, excuse me for a moment, Hal, but that's, the whole idea of where we are now. I mean, I grew up and you grew up in luckier times when America looked a little bit more promising, when there was more optimism and things were getting done. But it's been, like you say, in the last 30, 40 years, it's gone the other way, and nobody's really taking on the problems that need to be taken on.
Well, I think that's a good point, Arlen. You think back to the 1960s, and although the Vietnam War casts a huge pall over that decade, and rightly so, also you can look at it and say that is when civil rights really, we still owe the descendants of slaves more than what the deal they got right now. They're not getting a fair deal. But we took a giant step forward in the 1960s towards addressing historical wrongs done to African Americans. We also did a lot to preserve open spaces, wild spaces, with the Great Society programs that addressed the Forest Service, the National Park Service. That was LBJ also. Yet today, we haven't made progress, I don't believe, since the 60s. We backslid. So again, it's very, very disheartening. It's very depressing.
Well, I know what you complained about, and I agree with you. The Democrats used to be the party of the working class, used to be, strong with the unions and everything else. And, they're not anymore. We've gone too far over to the corporate side, and we're not, before, in those days, there was some hope for the future. There was more positive thinking, more, excitement about the future. But now everybody's more than anything just scared about what's coming up in the future.
It's very unfortunate. Who's to blame? I mean, I want you to point some fingers. Are you to blame? I mean, you're like,
not me.
Are you considered a baby boomer? I guess you would be, right?
Yeah,
a little
very much,
older,
very much.
A little before my time as a baby boomer. I'm the end of the generation. Is our generation at fault here? I'm not going to listen. I got nothing to do with this. I did everything I could. But are we as a generation, people blame us? I don't think that. You have to look at individuals, right? You have to look at individual people. This is that.
Well, you have to look at everything, and nobody's really taken on all these problems and tried to solve them. Certainly not our political parties, certainly not government. Nobody really knows what to do. And I think a lot of it has to do just with and in my opinion, the capitalist system has a lot to do with it, where that's more important than anything else. The value is how much money do you have, how much profit are you making? And, that's more important than anything else as far as quality of life and climate.
Well, certainly the kind of capitalism we have now, which is rapacious, soulless, basically monopolistic or oligopolistic, anyway, worldview capitalism with I agree. We do benefit, obviously, in many ways from a market economy. I don't know how we could distribute in an integrated, interrelated world of close to 10 billion people. I don't know how goods could possibly be distributed in an efficient manner absent a for-profit system. But that said, we need to do much more to rein it in and to force uh, the system itself, through correct incentives and carrots, sticks and carrots, to benefit poor, struggling, working people to a much greater degree, and to reduce the great benefits that a tiny number of global elites have accrued for themselves. Getting a little feedback there. There we go, Arlen. Go ahead. I got a little bit back from you, but I think we're okay.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's, things are not getting done, and those who are at the top are not going to give up what they have, and they're going to fight to keep it, keep their, tax breaks and so on. And, unless we can figure out a way to get a handle on income inequality and making the bottom part of our country, improve, we're not going to get very far, because there's just way too much in the way of homelessness and not having enough food and all these other problems that we never had before. I mean,
well,
when
probably
I grew up,
more people, you often hear about how, and people like Nick Kristof and others talking about how great things are. Steven Pinker, I think, at the New York Times, or at Harvard, who sometimes writes for the New York Times. But we also have more suffering than we've ever had before, in part because there's so many people on the planet. So even if there are fewer as a percentage of people who are hungry, the total number is so great. And then the suffering that, animals that we keep in cages, that we keep, in tiny little enclosures, those that we're extinguishing through climate change and habitat destruction, they're suffering as well. So it's a gloomy picture, Arlen, but here's a slide I just put up for you. This probably put a little wind in your sails. Joe Biden over the weekend just crushing his opponents in the Democratic primary.
Yeah, he didn't have a lot of competition, as I recall, but he did pretty well. So give him credit.
Well, he's got the support of Jim Clyburn, who is kind of a kingmaker there in the Palmetto State. I think you got to be, if you're Mary, I know there are progressives. I'm not one of them who have backed Marianne Williamson. I think they have to look at that number and reconsider the possibility that there can be any kind of change within the party. But that said, she was a particularly poor vessel for bringing about any change in the Democratic Party. Unlike Bernie, who had a long track record, who had great integrity. She's, a phony kind, snake oil saleswoman. So not surprising she isn't doing well. But those who support her, people like Crystal and Kyle, Brianna Joy Gray, my cohorts on the left, really need to reconsider, I think, why they supported her. Look into that closely and hopefully not make that same mistake again.
Well, the whole country, I think, is very upset about what people think is likely going to be the 2024 presidential race. You'll have the same people that were there in 2016, in 2020, and it's just not going to, nothing's going to be changing. And we have to vote for one of two, old people, and who really, when we need, I think, some good, young, vibrant people who with some real change in mind, that are willing to take some chances. But we're not going to get that with what we have now.
Do you think, though, Arlen, I asked you this question before, but I want to ask it again. If we accept the framing that you and people like James Carville make, which is that the election is purely a binary exercise between the Republican nominee and the Democratic nominee, I think there's truth to that. I'm not saying that's not an, certainly defensible way to look at it. But if we accept that framing and we accept that our only choices are whoever the Democrats nominate, whoever the Republicans nominate, what incentive is there, especially on the Democratic side, to change, to become more pro-worker, to become more pro-environment?
You're absolutely right. You have to wonder about that. The Democrats don't seem to, I mean, what are people going to do? I mean, every week, Cal, I keep saying the same thing. It's our system that's all messed up. We have a constitution that's outdated and just doesn't work for now. And but that's all we've got. No one is willing to, say, hey, let's not look at the Constitution. That's our law, so we have to deal with it, and it's almost impossible to change it. So, I don't know what we're going to do.
So, Arlen, you gave me a couple links for articles that you wanted to sort of discuss, and we're getting to them a bit late, so I apologize for that. But this is a grim story with the word "grimmer" in the headline. You want to just talk a little bit about this? I've got some some additional cutouts from the article that I can share, but you have experienced this, having written for the Monterey Herald and at one point being laid off from that gig.
Yeah, I was a journalism major in college, and it's all very, something I'm very much interested in. But we could see that we're not getting very good journalism these days. We're seeing places like with establishment, like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the major networks. They're all losing their base, their customers, their viewers, to social media and crazy conspiracy theories and Fox News. And that's not going to help us. That's going to make it so that people don't have enough information, and it's certainly not enough true information. And Donald Trump's been harping about fake news, and there's a lot of truth to that too. So mostly on their side, but
well, there you go. There's some reporting from the Times, prominent newspapers like the Washington Post, L.A. Times are laying off very significant numbers of staffers, and we're seeing that in the Washington Post is my city paper. It's not what it once was, and I certainly don't agree often with their editorial policy, but their local coverage, their coverage of our county has always been very valuable, very important ultimately, and we're losing some of that. I give the Post credit for maintaining a local presence, but I don't know how much longer that's going to happen, and they've definitely cut back on their staff. I mean, it's definitely impacting on the quality of the paper. I wanted to share this because the New York Times in this article, interestingly, Arlen, doesn't mention that it's not just what are considered to be, I suppose, more liberal or more progressive papers that are cutting back. You're also seeing, the Wall Street Journal. So they didn't mention this. I was very surprised because I had seen this article just a couple of days ago, and this is an important newspaper as well. And the Wall Street Journal, there you go, big layoffs, cutting back. They're cutting out their entire DC bureau, taking a hatchet, 20 staffers. That adds to a brutal start to 2024. I wanted to add this in because no one would ever consider the Wall Street Journal a progressive or liberal or media, but yet they too are suffering.
Well, it wouldn't be so bad if those big papers and all that would suffer if there was something else to go to, but there really isn't. There's no, what bothers me the most is cities around the country used to have, at least one local paper. Sometimes, larger cities had two or three, and those, people were aware of what's going on in their community. If there was something bad going on in government, local government, they could write about it. But most people don't know that anymore because they don't have that kind of information. People are going to social media and going to to places that they agree with, that they feel best about, but you're not getting objective coverage, objective news, and objective solutions to these kind of all the problems that we have, which are many.
Do you have any solutions to offer, Arlen? Because I really don't. I mean, one thing I've often heard people say is we need government to step in and fund the news media, but I'm very skeptical. I don't know that government funded news is what we need. What we need is independent news that can be, and maybe if you have lots of government, small cities and stuff funding newspapers, but I just fear those would become very quickly tools of political elites.
Yeah, I mean, you got to find some objectivity somewhere, and that's the problem. Yeah, the BBC is, is a good example of a good network, but basically, yeah, you don't want the government involved in telling us how to think and feel and what to do, and so uh, yeah, I don't know what we could do, Hal,
I
but
mean, the BBC is fine as one of many options. But the problem is when the government media becomes the go to. And the BBC is basically pretty standard establishment, liberal, similar editorial policy to CNN, to MSNBC. They're not going to tell you why Brexit was so popular among British working class people, just like the New York Times won't. So
well, yeah,
I don't know what, a big part of this, of course, is income and wealth inequality because media is going to chase people who advertisers want as readers, and they're going to chase advertisers. And as the middle class is hollowed out, and only elites and very wealthy people have the kind of spending money that advertisers thirst for, media again concentrates its attention on those few wealthy people to as
yeah.
an audience.
Well, you could depend on certain places to go. Well, like when I grew up, you got the major networks, you got the major newspapers. They were considered to be fairly objective. Like the news media was not supposed to be for profit; it was supposed to be a loss leader, and so they were able to be more objective and not try to help their sponsors and all that. But now it's they decided to go for profits, and that's why there's a difference now. And of course, points of view. Everybody either wants to go toward Fox News and their ilk, or go the other way, toward a more progressive media, and you're just not getting any objectivity, to make really good decisions.
Well, you make a good point, Arlen. Here's what the New York Times says about that. If there's one bright spot, it's local television news. Apparently, they are still able to garner advertising rates, and there is some competition. Monterey really doesn't. I was asking about that. There's basically, when I was there were two local stations, KSBW and KION, and I don't think KION, which is Fox, is doing very much. I think KSBW was kind of a joint of NBC and maybe ABC. I could be wrong about that. So Monterey is not one of those markets that has 3 or 4 competing newsrooms, but of course you wouldn't necessarily say it's a market of real size. Not a tiny market, in the around 80th nationwide, but I think when they say any size, they're thinking, even a Seattle, which isn't an enormous market, or Portland, but still probably top 20, 25.
Yeah, it was kind of news to me about local television news doing pretty well, and I think that's a good thing, unless you've got people like, the owner of Sinclair News, who is, very conservative and makes sure that his local stations get his point of view, and he's just bought, as you know, your local Baltimore Sun, and who knows what he's going to do with that. So, you don't want that either.
No, we don't. On the other hand, he has said, David Smith has said he's going to focus on local coverage. And that would be nice because the Sun hasn't really had much local coverage recently. I mean, they've had the only coverage of Baltimore often, and they've been valuable. And I like the Sun in a lot of ways, and I actually subscribe to it. But more local coverage, if indeed Dave Smith provides it, would certainly be welcome. But you're right. I mean, this is certainly not a positive development in any way. There just may be one silver lining to that cloud.
Yeah, because Sinclair's record is, they've managed to get their editorial viewpoint, by force everywhere on all their stations. Their editorials have to be read on their particular stations. And you can't have that. That's not right. That's not fair. And you can't have one point of view taking over, the whole.
Well, I mean, look, ownership has its privileges, and the very right-wing Smith family has built this empire. Obviously, there's a significant number of people who are buying what they're selling. I think that's very unfortunate, Arlen, but it is the way it is.
Well, your
would
show is
have a
kind of
solution.
biased, Hal. Your
Say
show is
again?
biased from your point of view. So,
That's
I guess
true.
you don't have to
No
talk.
argument. I am definitely biased. You're absolutely right. I mean, I don't know what to say about that, but I don't feel, and I could be totally wrong. I don't feel like my bias is based on my own self-interest, in the sense that if I can convince other people to believe what I believe, then I'll get more money for myself. The views that I present are views that I think, unless I'm really fooling myself, would make life better for most people, and in some ways would not be particularly beneficial to me. Some of the tax policy that I call for, higher taxes on wealthy people, would not particularly redound to my benefit. They might be just the opposite. I don't want to get into all that, but there's no question it wouldn't be particularly valuable. And when it comes to healthcare, I have pretty good healthcare already, but I still believe in, having Medicare for all. It wouldn't, but it might arguably cost me something in taxes. But everyone should have healthcare in my view. So I don't think it's the same as when a person who's a multimillionaire is promoting low tax rates because they know they'll pay lower taxes. It's not the same, but I understand what you're saying. We all have our own perspectives.
You do a good job presenting different points of view, and you do put on people who are like thought leaders and political pundits. So you get a different point of view on a lot of issues.
I have one thought leader. I have one thought leader every week, and he's on Mondays. And here he is, Arlen Grossman. All right, this was another story. Ezra Klein, by the way, talk about rich guys. Ezra Klein, I don't know if he's worth 9 figures, but I think he's well into the 8s, meaning over $10 million from his very successful foray into internet journalism with Vox Media. But even there, it's interesting, that article, we're going to move on to Klein, but I just want to harken back to it for a moment. Vox Media, according to the New York Times, also having to cut back its staff.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. So
I guess that's a good thing that Fox can, but there's always so many.
No, not Fox, not Fox, Arlen. I'm sorry, not Fox with an F. Vox with a V. Vox, like Vox Populi.
Oh, okay.
Ezra Klein is one of the founders of Vox Media. He's the author of this piece that you had recommended, the Democratic Party is having an identity crisis. He writes for the New York Times. He does videos for the New York Times. He started out at the Washington Post, and he built an empire with some help from, I think you may know the name Matthew Iglesias. I think the two of them kind of founded Vox with a V, not Fox with an F, Vox Media, and made tens of millions, if not $100 million doing that. And he writes here, the Democratic Party is having an identity crisis. So his extreme wealth, in my view, does bias this article in certain ways. But let's talk about this, Arlen, and why this caught your attention. You want to discuss it.
Well, of course, we've been talking about it already. The Democratic Party, it used to be, a party for the working class, for the, unions and the poor. They were more not so much as they are now, which is very pro-corporatist, even though not as bad as the Republicans. So the party has changed. People can see that. They're disappointed, and they think, well, how come my life's not improving when I have even Democrats in power, when Biden and, Obama and, we're all, so many people are struggling, and it's a good point. What the Democrats are not the same as they used to be. They seem a little bit more elitist, and they're losing minority votes. They're losing votes from young people just because of, the fact that those people don't feel that there's much change in their, in their lifestyles.
Or it's getting worse. Or
yes.
For many, I think for younger voters, issues that really loom large, and I hate to say it's younger voters because I don't like to generalize, and these are issues that are incredibly important to me. So these are right at the top of my list too. But maybe in some ways, I think my sensibilities are similar to some younger voters. In other ways, very different. I'm very much against identity politics. I'm against the woke politics that some young voters seem to embrace. But when it comes to the environment, when it comes to the war in Gaza, the genocidal war there, I'm totally in sync with younger voters. I highlighted this. The squad feels more like a faction than a future. I don't think there's any doubt. That is so correct, Arlen, in my
Yeah.
opinion. When AOC and some of her team kind of joined up, there was optimism. Maybe they can appeal to younger voters, to maybe a multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition that they can kind of lead to a more progressive place in terms of Congress. And that hasn't happened.
No.
I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I have noticed that I've looked at some polls recently where younger people are very pessimistic about the future, very pessimistic about government and politics, and that's understandable. They're not getting the results they'd like to see. They don't feel like anybody's really on their side doing things for them. Certainly not, maybe 1-year-old guy like Joe Biden, and even worse, somebody like Trump. So,
well, has AOC, has the squad let them down, in your opinion? I'm going to play a clip in a moment, but I just want your take.
Well, I think the squad is fine. AOC is fine, but they don't have enough clout. They just don't have the money. They don't have the influence. They don't have, they're just a small part of the Democratic Party, just a faction. And, they're nowhere
near. Why is that then? Before I play the clip, why are they just a faction? Shouldn't, if they're presenting views that a disaffected, sizable minority of voters believe in, younger voters, working class voters, if they're really on the side of those people, then how come they're not embracing them? Why are they just a faction?
Well, I don't know how many young people are really following politics and government and things like, AOC, people like AOC and all that. These, the squad and all that, they're not getting promoted. People aren't really seeing what they're saying. And, until that happens, they're not going to have much influence.
Well, Arlen, not being promoted. Look at what's on your screen. Can you see that? She's right there on Meet the Press. How much more promotion does she need?
When you think about it, how many young people actually watch Meet the Press? It's just not the average.
Isn't it on her? She got herself elected. She must have done something to appeal to a significant number of voters in her district. A majority of voters, or close to it, voted for her, or did vote. Well, a very sizable number of voters put her over the top, obviously, in the Democratic primary back in, I think it was, whatever I always get them wrong, but let's say 2016. So if that's correct, she must have had some way, she must have figured out some way to appeal to those voters. You say she's not exposed. She's right there on Meet the Press. I think you're far too willing to overlook or not to explore the obvious failings of these people who I, as a progressive, at one point had faith in. But let me play this clip and see what you think.
Your colleagues, and we talked about what's happened at the protests this week, have called the president Genocide Joe. Some of your colleagues have accused the president of supporting genocide, including Rashida Tlaib. Do you agree with that word, genocide, that the president's been supporting a genocide, or does that go too far?
All right, so I'll stop it right there. That's a very, very easy yes or no question. Now, you either say, yes, I do agree that he's supporting genocide, or no, I don't agree. Or you could say it's somewhat complicated, as I would say. I think that there's mass killings, there are genocidal acts. Not certain I would call it genocide. You could say that. But let's listen to her response and see whether this is the kind of response that voters who are desperate for a champion would embrace.
I think what we are seeing right now throughout the country is that young people are appalled at the violence and the indiscriminate loss of life. We are not just seeing 25,000 people that have died in Gaza. We are seeing the starvation of millions of people, the displacement of over 2 million Gazans. We have.
All right, so I'm going to stop it right there. It is true. What she's saying is those are awful things, and I'm glad she's pointing them out. but she completely ignores, so far, we'll see if it goes beyond, ignores Joe Biden's responsibility, his complicity. Or is he complicit? He supports continuing funding Israel. The weapons that Israel's using to kill these people come from the United States in many cases. And if they don't, our aid helps them pay for them or manufacture them. If Joe Biden said, stop it right now, we're not going to give you any help, Netanyahu would probably have to really pull back. He would. I mean, Israel can't survive alone against the entire world. Right now, they're not alone against the U.S. world because the U.S. is with them. She can't say any of that. Don't you find that incredibly, I mean, if not upsetting, just like meh? Well, I mean, she was supposed to be the champion who was going to take on the corruption in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, but she can't do it herself, Hal.
Why not? Why can't she, Arlen? And she wouldn't have to anyway. She's got plenty of other people. She's got Jamal Bowman, and she's got Cori Bush, and she's got Rashida Tlaib has called out Biden. She's one of the squad. Ocasio-Cortez could say, yes, I support what Rashida Tlaib's saying. So she wouldn't even be by herself. But let's say she were. Bernie stood by himself. Why can't she stand by herself?
Well, first of all, I mean, she doesn't have a whole lot of clout because she doesn't have a lot of, money and exposure behind her. I would vote.
She has a lot of money. She raises a ton of money. Actually, she's one of the Congress members who raises more money than a lot of others at this point.
Well, I'm sure she raises enough to get herself elected, but I don't know if she's got the millions that others do. But that's one reason why young people are not feeling so good about Biden, because he's not doing what he should be doing and what AOC is asking him to do. And I don't understand either why Joe Biden doesn't be a little bit stronger about standing up against Netanyahu and stopping all the killing in Gaza. But for some reason, he feels he has to stay with what he's doing. And I think that's a mistake.
So, Arlen, when Donald Trump does something you don't like, which is pretty much every 5 minutes at a minimum, it's all because he has bad character. He's a bad person. His supporters are stupid and they're deplorable and they're totally you can't possibly understand them. When Joe Biden does bad things, I don't know why he does those things. He must feel like he can't do anything else. AOC can't stand by herself. She needs the support of the Democratic Party. She doesn't have the money. Do you see how you make all these excuses for the Democrats and you are utterly unwilling to even consider any possible excuse for the Republican?
Well, at least the Democrats are trying to get some things done. They are.
See, that's a yes, no. This is what you say. You say, you're right, Hal. You make a good point. I'm going to consider that and maybe, take that into account going forward.
Hey, I didn't become a pundit and a thought leader by listening to you.
You most certainly did not. And that is an excellent answer. But there you go. From 2020, AOC builds political army and a fundraising machine to match. So she, in fact, does have her own independent power base at this point, Arlen. And with that money, she is able to really call some shots. And yet she seems she's a coward, right? She's cowardly.
I don't think that's the case. I think she doesn't really have a lot of power in the Democratic Party. She says the right things, and I'd like to, her to be in charge rather than Joe Biden, but that's not going to happen. So, I'm not unhappy with what she does. I'm just more unhappy about the Democratic Party and Joe Biden, who should be doing a lot more. And that's why why Biden is losing some of the young people in some of these polls.
Yeah, I think that certainly Joe Biden deserves, lots of excoriation, but frankly, so does the woman on your screen who could be pushing Joe Biden, who could be standing up and saying no, and who simply won't do it. And I think that's what, and frankly, this is a big reason so many young people are disaffected, in my opinion, because when they find a champion, they find a young, look, she's still a young woman. She's in her 30s. She doesn't have the gray hair. When they find someone to champion who they really believe they're, oh my gosh, someone finally is on our side, and then she isn't.
She's not doing anything wrong. I don't see her saying the wrong thing. She knows.
Africa that has mounted a court in the ICJ. The ICJ ruled this week that Israel has a grave responsibility to prevent genocide.
But they're still determining whether it's a genocide. Do you think that
they are still determining
given
it?
That it's still under investigation?
I believe that they're still determining it, but in the interim ruling, the fact that they said there's a responsibility to prevent it, the fact that this word is even in play, the fact that this word is even in our discourse, I think demonstrates the mass inhumanity that Gazans are facing. And so whether you are an individual that believes this is a genocide, which, by the way, in our polling, we are seeing large amounts of Americans concerned specifically with that word. So I don't think that it is something to completely toss someone out of our public discourse.
So that's that strong, powerful progressive. We shouldn't throw somebody out because they use the word genocide. That's hardly a powerful, strong position. It's just the opposite. She's like, well, I guess we can tolerate someone who uses the word genocide. If she believes it's as bad as she seems to believe, Arlen, why'd she endorse Joe Biden in the first place? Why didn't she say, I can't support any of the Democrats right now. We'll wait till after the primaries. I don't understand that. If she's a champion of what, and she just said it, young voters are appalled at what's happening and at Joe Biden's support of it. If she's really a champion, why isn't she saying, no, I can't vote for Joe Biden? At least I can't say now, I can't tell people to vote for him. I mean, that's what we want. You may not want that. That's what young people want.
Well, she's realistic, Hal, and it's like we say over and over again, what are the choices? You got Trump.
Well, being realistic isn't going to win you votes from young people. Young people look at realism and they say, I'm living on a dying planet because of realism, because Joe Biden has to be realistic and placate the oil and gas industry. I'm living in a country that is complicit in genocide because AOC is being realistic and won't call Joe Biden out. So they're not accepting realism as you define it.
Well, I'd love to vote for AOC. I don't have that opportunity, and neither does anybody else. And then that's the problem with our system. If we had multiple candidates and the kind of ballots like they have in Europe, where you have lots of candidates and they get to be at least have part of the government, I think that would be great. But our system is set up so that it's winner take all, and it's done by states, and whoever has, and if somebody has the less votes, they can still be president. It's crazy. And I don't know what more she could do other than talk about what she's talking about now.
Well, I think what is so frustrating, and maybe it's not for you, but what's so frustrating for many of us on the left, and I see this so much with Jamie Raskin and other quasi-progressive or ersatz progressive, is they invariably pivot. Whenever one criticizes the Democratic Party, they invariably pivot to blame Republicans. It's always the Republicans' fault. Yes, we're seeing the Republicans do that. There's simply a complete unwillingness to look into their own house and try to clean it. And that, to me, is a huge part of the problem. We need a multi-racial, multi-ethnic, poor, struggling, working class coalition. And as long as the two parties engage in this finger pointing, then we'll never get it.
Yeah, no, I share your pessimism, and it's very unfortunate. But, how do we change the system in which we vote for people so that we actually have choices? We don't really
hopefully we have people that we elect who will actually take on the elites regardless of what party they're in. And by the way, you do see that with Republicans. The Republicans did not circle the wagons around Kevin McCarthy. They said, nope, you're not doing what we want. Now, I don't often I often disagree with the extremists in the Republican Party, but they take on their leadership. They are willing to buck the establishment, if you will. You simply don't see that with virtually no exceptions on the left.
Well, you can see what's happening to the Republican Party. They're all behind Trump, and not really. And they're listening to what he's saying. If they come up with this border policy, and Trump says, "Well, we don't want it because we want the border to be, really bad for the election time," and so they all go along with that. They're totally, on Trump, on the Trump team, and what's that all about?
Well, Trump is very popular. He is very popular, and I saw an article that said his policies are popular, at least among the Republican base. So, given that fact, it is understandable that Republican rank and file would circle the wagons to a degree around Trump because he is popular. But the Democrats circle the wagons around unpopular politicians, around people that most of us feel like are doing bad things. Like you just saw with AOC. She couldn't call out Joe Biden. She couldn't even say his name. Yeah, I can understand why people are calling him Genocide Joe, or it's really, really bad what he's doing in Israel. She couldn't even say that. So, and most people would agree with her. So I think the difference there is that the Republicans, as much as they may hate Trump, and I think many of them do, you see Nikki Haley, I'm sure she can't stand Trump. As much as they may dislike Trump, they recognize that his policies have widespread support. The Democrats, on the other hand, support leaders who don't have widespread support in their party. You saw every Democrat vote for Hakeem Jeffries to be the Speaker of the House and then Minority Leader. You saw every Democrat vote for Nancy Pelosi, even though she has a 70% disapproval rating across the country. So the Democrats circle the wagons around unpopular leaders with bad policies that their own constituents don't like.
By the way, you mentioned people like Trump's policies. Can you name a Trump policy that people like? Because I haven't seen any policies coming from the Republican Party that would improve anything.
Oh, I'm not saying they're necessarily all good policies, but his base loves the border policy, for example. His base supports when he talks about tariffs and protecting American jobs. His base likes that. Now, I don't think he's been following through on that. His base doesn't want war with Ukraine, war with Russia in support of Ukraine. Unfortunately, he seems to be backtracking on that position. But those are areas where he does have popular support.
Well, I just don't see anything coming from the Republican Party, from Congress, anywhere that's going to, actually become a law or some policy that's going to help.
I'm just making the point that Republican Congress members are willing on occasion to stand against their leaders. You don't see that with virtually no exceptions. You see that with virtually no exceptions on the Democratic side. And I think that's very frustrating for voters who look at the Democratic leadership and see it as calcified, corporatist, and corrupt. And by the way, the words corporate and corrupt do not appear in that article by Ezra Klein. And that's where I say he's biased. His bias shows because he's simply unwilling, and maybe it's just the New York Times, to say this party is the party of the billionaire class, no less than the Republican Party is.
Well, yeah, we can see that the Democrat Party is, pro-corporatist, just like the Republican Party, and doesn't seem to want to make any changes to that kind of policy. But, the Republicans don't have, they're all circling around Trump, whatever he wants. Yeah, they want border security, but they're not going to let it happen. If Trump says, don't make it happen, we're going to make Biden look bad. So,
well, that's a political calculation that they're making, that it's better for their party politically not to give Joe Biden a win. That's a little different, though, from what I'm talking about, which is where where progressive Democrats refuse to stand up to their own leaders, even when those leaders when the leaders of their party are promoting policies that their own constituents don't like. That's not really what the Republicans are doing here. They're just playing political games. But that's different from AOC and her squad voting for somebody that their own constituents really may not like at all, and endorsing a president who's very unpopular, even among their own base. So I don't think it's the same. I think you're kind of conflating two different things. And so, yeah, I mean.
But I can see your mind now is going to football.
It is, because we're over an hour, Arlen, and I want to just give you an opportunity to tell us what you think is going to happen in this game. But before you do you find a 2-point spread for the 49ers? In other words, you have to give 2 points to the Chiefs if you want to bet on the 49ers straight up. Do you find that to be odd? I mean, the Chiefs have arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. I would say he is not the greatest. I would say Tom Brady is, but they certainly have arguably the most skilled quarterback, the quarterback with the most talent in terms of a great arm, accuracy, smarts, running ability. They also have, a great tight end.
I've heard about it.
And they have
yeah.
a strong defense. So are you surprised that the updated point spread has the 49ers the favorites in this Super Bowl?
No, I think it's small enough that it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. The 49ers just have stars all over the place, McCaffrey and Purdy and all that. They have lots and lots of talent, just like Kansas City does. So I think, it could go either way. I'm not going to predict which team is going to come out ahead at the end, but it'll be a great game. And I'm glad that hopefully we'll be able to watch it, which we wouldn't have been able to do yesterday and where I live because of the power going off. So I'm glad that the Super Bowl wasn't this past Sunday and it's going to be next Sunday.
I was thinking that exact same thought. When you told me about no power, I thought, oh no, what if Arlen can't watch the Super Bowl? He will not be a happy camper. Is there more rain in the forecast? There's been so much this year. It wouldn't surprise me if you did get another storm.
Well, I don't know about, a week from now. I think I'm not expecting anything really bad to happen then, but, maybe I should just go to Las Vegas. I'm not that far away and see if I can get a ticket to the game.
Well, I think you're going to spend a few $1,000s at a minimum to get lousy seats, so you may not want to do that. It'd probably be more fun to watch it in a comfort of your own home or in a bar with a widescreen TV and high def. Would certainly be my preference. You may feel differently.
Well, my preference would be up in a box with Taylor Swift and their family.
I don't think you're going to get invited into that box with Taylor Swift. But let me ask you this, Arlen, even if you somehow score tickets, are you in for the 49ers? I mean, I know you're a fan. Do you feel like your fandom is biasing you? Where do you see this game ending? How do you see it ending?
I wouldn't make a guess or a prediction, Hal, because it's just going to be close, I'm pretty sure. And I like both teams. And it, wouldn't bother me if Kansas City won. So, I think it's just going to be a good game. You have a lot of great players. It's going to be close. It's going to be competitive and very exciting, I think.
Are you surprised, Arlen, that I think a lot of what you say is true. I think they're balanced. They're reasonably likable teams. There's no one. I'm not aware of bad actors. At least the stars on both teams, when I've seen them interviewed, they seem like decent sorts. So you're basically not going to make a prediction, is what you're saying.
Right. There's no point in making a prediction because I know it'll be close and either team could do it. And,
right,
I might be right.
We're going to end the program in a moment, but this is the question that I lost. I had in my head and I lost it for a moment. Are you surprised that the 49ers made it to the Super Bowl in light of that spanking the Baltimore Ravens, who are not playing in this game, gave them in December? I have to say, after that game where Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens completely outplayed Brock Purdy and the 49ers, I did not expect the 49ers to make it this far. I thought it was more likely to be, well, maybe I don't know. I don't really know. I'm a little surprised they were able to recover and just have such a strong run and now be the favorites.
Well, both Kansas City and San Francisco have a lot of playoff experience. They've been there several times recently, so that's certainly an advantage over a team like Baltimore, who doesn't have that kind of experience. So that's probably a big part of it.
I think that's a good point. I think that's a fair point. I agree with that. Arlen, I got nothing more. If you have a final word beyond what you just said about the Super Bowl, please share it. Otherwise, we'll talk in a week online, and you will presumably have watched the game, assuming there isn't another storm, and we can discuss it.
And we should also try to figure out what the deal is with Taylor Swift and the
Well,
tight
I did
end.
a program on Taylor Swift last week. Obviously, you missed it. You need to go back into my archives. You'll see there's an image of her with Travis Kelce. And the question is, why do we care? Why, what was it? I can't even remember what it was like. Why is she with him and why do we care? The answers are why we need higher taxes. That's what that's the, not what I called the program, but that's the gist of it.
You know what the MAGA conspiracy types are saying? They're saying that Kansas City is going to win. It's all preordained, and they're going to go down at halftime with Joe Biden and endorse him. And so, I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll have to wait and see.
It's kind of weird. This is the thing. The Republicans, and I said this to you off the air, they're pretty good at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. They're in decent shape anyway in the polls, maybe a slight advantage for Trump, but this kind of nuttery is going to do only harm to their chances, their electoral chances. Doesn't mean they'll lose, but it means they're more likely to lose. I don't know who advises these people. I don't know what they're thinking.
There's, like I always say, there's a lot of time until November, so I think eventually, Trump is going to go down, and maybe Nikki Haley will end up being the nominee. We'll see.
We shall see. Arlen, thank you. Great to have you on. And that will do it.